The UFC Fight Pass Invitational is headed your way on June 29th, and if you haven't heard yet, there's a pretty exciting matchup on it as we welcome the two-time NCAA champion RBY, Roman Bravo Young, to the Fight Pass Invitational mat. He will take on UFC veteran Alex Perez. Here to talk about RBY and the stakes here of a standout wrestler is Zach Bogle. He is the host of the StaleMates Podcast. Zach, I appreciate your time, man. When I look at, mixed martial arts, we always think about like the kickboxer versus the jiu-jitsu guy, things like that. But in grappling, there is a mixing of the martial arts as well. Even though Alex Perez is a pretty good wrestler, he's a MMA wrestler, if you will. He's not the caliber of wrestler that Roman Bravo Young is. What are your thoughts on the fact that RBY is moving over to the submission grappling mat and taking on a pretty dangerous grappler in the likes of Alex Perez?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, honestly, especially since he's been pretty vocal that this will be the next phase of his combat sports career. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
What are your thoughts on the avenue that has opened up for high-level wrestlers to make the transition to mixed martial arts? I mean, it's always been there. You're going back to the days of like Kevin Randleman and Mark Coleman, but more recently we see Bo Nickel, make the move. There was a lot of talk about Jordan Burroughs possibly moving over to MMA. It never really happened. Do you think this is a smart move for high-level wrestlers?
Yeah, I think it's a smart move as long as it's the right move for the wrestler. I just hope that there's not wrestlers looking at other wrestlers and seeing their success and doing it because of money or the fame. As you see Bo Nickel, he's everywhere. It seems like he's kind of the next up-and-comer that the UFC has, and it seems like they're really fast-tracking him to success, also because he's really freaking good, right? So a lot of these wrestlers are really, really good athletes. They're really disciplined, and it's definitely a different environment around wrestling. I think in jiu-jitsu may be a little bit more laid back and a little bit, I don't want to say technical, because they're both very technical, right? But it seems like jiu-jitsu's, like I said, a little bit more laid back, and wrestling is a lot more intense and whatnot. So I just hope that it is a good thing in the long run, and that wrestlers are doing this because they love combat sports and not just because the money and fame. Although I can't knock them for doing that either. So I think it's great. I'd like to see more of it happen as long as it's for the right reasons.
We talk about Bo Nickel, obviously former Nittany Lion, as is RBY. When I see Bo Nickel's name, I'm brought back to him doing the Fight Pass Invitational. He's a standout wrestler, but also a pretty good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. What should we, or is it even fair, I guess, to expect anything from RBY based on what we saw in the grappling department from Bo Nickel?
Yeah, I think it's fair to have a high expectation for RBY. He's been dominant throughout his whole combat sports career. In high school, he was, I believe, 182-0. So the guy is a competitor, doesn't like to lose. I don't think that he would be doing this if he thought that he was going to lose, or I don't think that he's doing this just to say that he did it. I think he wants to do this to show the MMA community that he is next up, just like his predecessor in Bo Nickel, his past teammate.
I'm curious. Are there high stakes here? I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a spectacle. It's fun. It's going to be interesting to see, a high-level wrestler, again, come over to the submission grappling mat. But for Alex Perez, this is kind of his opportunity to say, like, look, I can hang with, anyone. A great wrestler like this. Like, again, he's got wrestling chops of his own, just not on the same sort of scale. Is this going to be one where both of these guys, you think, really care about getting their hand raised at the end of the night?
Yeah, I think for both guys, you got a guy like RBY who wants to introduce himself to this new world. He wants to say that he is the guy. And if you look at Alex Perez in his last two fights in MMA, he's been submitted twice. So his last two losses, he's been submitted. He wants to come back, in my opinion, and show the fight fans that, hey, just because I got submitted twice doesn't mean that I'm not mean at jiu-jitsu. So I think this is a good opponent for RBY to step in and really make a name against a ranked UFC fighter like Alex Perez. And I feel like if you're Alex Perez, it also looks good for you because you beat a high-level grappler with a huge social media following on Instagram and TikTok and everything else. So I think for both, it's a win-win, and probably the match that you might not be shocked, but it's my most anticipated match on this card.
For good reason. Anytime you can see a high-level grappler, sort of make a move to a skill set where they're going to be able to show not only what they're known for, but, folds into it, you always walk away with something. And we talk about Bo Nickel. Like, I remember the Fight Pass Invitational, he went to his back. Like, Bo Nickel going to his back, That doesn't make sense, but he did. And I'm curious if we're going to see RBY just be sort of, pardon the pun, but go with the flow in this type of grappling match.
Yeah, I agree. It should be interesting.
What do you think about RBY's ability to actually go for finishing holds? Like, Perez is a competent jiu-jitsu guy. You mentioned he has been caught. Do you think that RBY is capable of catching Alex?
Yeah, I think capable, yes. Is he going to do it? We'll see. I think that he's somebody that is very technical. Obviously, he's athletic. If you watch any RBY highlight, you're going to see some pretty mind-blowing stuff. However, I don't know if he's going to be able to utilize that in a jiu-jitsu match.
Right.
But I do think that he's a very technical guy. He's surrounded by a lot of guys that are already in the MMA game. He's surrounded himself with guys like Dominic Cruz, obviously being in Penn State. At State College, they got the gym up there as well. So I think if he's going to do it, he's going to try to finish him. But I think just winning and not getting submitted and or even a draw would be a win for RBY.
What do you think about Alex Perez? Do you think he's going to actually try to match wrestling wits with RBY? Because I think about, when we have two good wrestlers, it comes down to a scramble fest. But both have to really want to wrestle for it to be there. Do you think Perez is going to try to prove something and take RBY down?
I'll say this with all respect to Alex Perez. I don't advise that he do that. I think if you look at the two wrestling accolades between the two of them, and Alex Perez would admit this himself, I'm assuming, the JUCO scene is a little bit different than the Division I scene. Alex Perez did what a lot of wrestlers haven't done, which is become an All-American at the JUCO level. But when you're facing someone like RBY, who's a multiple-time NCAA finalist, multiple-time NCAA champion, you don't try to out-wrestle him. That's just not going to go well for Alex Perez. Is he going to be able to stand his ground? Absolutely. But as far as trying to turn this into a wrestling match, I'm not sure if he wants to do that.
Yeah, is it fair to call RBY like one part wrestler, second part acrobat?
Yeah, I think that's a really good comparison. I thought you were going to say jiu-jitsu or grappler or something like that, but I think acrobat would be the better comparison. I was telling somebody the other day, they were asking me what makes RBY so special. And early on in his career, I believe it was his freshman year against Lehigh, he did basically a standing backflip in a position that you don't see quite often, and he scored from it. So that put him on the map. That put him on the map to a lot of people as this acrobatic wrestler that they want to watch. And in return, I think if you're wanting to watch this card this weekend, don't get up to get popcorn for this match. I'm telling you that.
And I guess, to see that out of RBY, we need to see him tested a little bit in the wrestling department, right? Like he's got to be put in a situation where he needs to scramble. If Alex Perez just comes out and says, we're going to play jiu-jitsu, there's not a lot of scrambles. I mean, there are, but not in the type of ways that we just described doing backflips and things like that.
Yeah, wrestling's really evolved over the past few years or the past probably decade into more of it's almost based in jiu-jitsu a little bit more these days. You're not seeing it so much on the feet as much. You're seeing a lot of guys when they are in positions where they're trying to score, you're seeing these long drawn out scrambles that you would see in a jiu-jitsu match. So RBY will be prepared. He's been in situations like that before. And like I've mentioned previously, he surrounded himself with guys who are able to coach him and teach him well. So, I'm looking forward to seeing some long drawn out scrambles. I hope that does happen.
Well, we can't wait to see what it looks like. The FPI headed your way on UFC Fight Pass. RBY is on it. I feel like I should call Alex Perez AP because we're just going with all these acronyms. But I'm TJ. He's Zach Bogle. Zach, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on. And we'll have to have you back because I think this isn't the last time we're going to talk about high-level wrestlers making their way to the UFC, whether it be in FPI format with the submission grappling or, of course, the world-famous Octagon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on.